Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is looking to rebuild its workforce after cutting more than a quarter of its employees last year, according to its top officials. But CDC employees heard similar messages from leadership months ago and have yet to see much hiring. Instead, the agency is relying on temporary reassignments to address staffing gaps, a strategy that is putting a toll on the workforce, according to employees. And this comes as CDC is upgrading its Ebola response to the highest level of threat. Federal News Network's Jory Heckman joins me with more details. Jory, thanks for being here.
Hey, Terry. Great to be here.
You and I have talked about CDC, it seems like, for the last 18 months. What is the current state of their workforce right now?
So the CDC is still dealing with some pretty significant staffing shortages. Compared to the beginning of the second Trump administration, the CDC is dealing with staffing loss of about a quarter to a third of its employees that are no longer there. And the Department of Health and Human Services more broadly is embarking on this pretty significant hiring surge. They're actually looking to get back to levels prior to the major RIF and reduction that we saw last year. So HHS has already done some considerable hiring already, and they're looking to hire about another 12,000 employees this year. CDC at this point, they've kind of been falling short on that priority as far as the hiring, and CDC employees say they really do need the personnel on board to handle a wide range of things going on. There's Ebola response. They recently concluded the response to the hantavirus, but other problems like New America screwworm and also other threats as well. They're really dealing with a broad portfolio of things, and also they've been activated for the FIFA World Cup.
What is the CDC leadership looking to do about this challenge?
Yeah, so more recently, CDC recently told employees at a town hall that they're going to go through what they call a strategic planning process, where they're going to understand where the gaps are in the CDC workforce. And based on that analysis, they're going to eventually go out and hire some people. This was all communicated by their new principal deputy director and chief operating officer, Steve Selensky. He spoke to employees at a recent CDC all-hands meeting at the headquarters in Atlanta. For some CDC employees, this kind of fell on deaf ears. They heard some of this before already. Back in March, the interim director, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who is also the Senate-confirmed director of the National Institutes of Health, said a lot of the same things. He said that CDC does have a need to hire and that they were especially going to focus on filling in some of the staffing gaps in CDC's chronic health departments.
So how have they been addressing some of the critical shortfalls in the meantime?
Well, one creative way to deal with that is that CDC has been relying on a lot of temporary reassignments, these 120-day temporary details that have been extended time and again in some instances. Basically, you're taking people from their day jobs, moving them to some other parts of the CDC that they are basically qualified for, but they may not have the specific background necessary to really thrive in these jobs. To give you one example, a CDC employee told me that someone in their office has been brought on board through one of these details to review some of the scientific information that goes on papers, the agency's public website, basically taking the doctorate level language and making sure it's understandable to a more general audience. That person doesn't really have a background in that work, and so as a result, the review for those publications, it's been slower. They've been putting out things at a slower cadence than they're used to.
As we sit now, though, they're facing this emergency response to the Ebola virus. So they're shorthanded. They don't have all the skills in all the right places. And now they've got a level 1 Ebola response. How are they pulling all of these things together?
Well, at some point, they're relying on things kind of day at a time, but Bhattacharya did put out a notice to all employees saying that this has been an upgraded response for Ebola, level 1, as you mentioned. For context, this is a pretty high-level situation here. Level 1 responses have been called for, of course, the COVID-19 outbreak in 2020, the pandemic, Zika, Hurricane Katrina, things of that nature. So a variety of threats there, but the vast majority of its activations are at the level 2 and 3, which are lower level threats. And so Bhattacharya is asking CDC employees to raise their hands and volunteer for these frontline deployments to handle the Ebola response in one way or another, going to airports domestically to screen passengers or possibly even going overseas to help with this response.
And you discovered that response could last 6 to 12 months. Do they have the capacity to maintain that level of mobilization?
We'll have to see. This really is a marathon, not a sprint. This is something that is going to be sustained for a while now. And all levels of CDC leadership acknowledge that they are going to have people rotate in to this work. It's not just always going to be the same people doing this work. It's going to be something that's going to ask a lot of the CDC workforce to pull off.
And what are you hearing now about the workforce's morale and motivation?
Well, CDC is aware that the morale is not great. A lot of CDC leadership at this recent town hall said as much, and they're trying to turn the page however they can. We're, of course, coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the shooting at the CDC campus that happened last August. It also somewhat coincides with the 80th anniversary of CDC. This actually happened in July, but they're going to try and tie all these things together, recognizing tough things, difficult things happened in the recent past for CDC, and they're hoping to see a brighter future. So as part of a 1-year commemoration of that shooting, they're going to name a street leading up to the campus after a police officer who was killed in the response, David Rose. Bhattacharya said that he really did sacrifice himself in the line of duty to save potentially CDC employees who could have been hurt or killed. However, in this meeting, he did get the officer's name wrong. He said it was Derek Rose, not David Rose. So that further kind of rankled some CDC employees, saying that just some attention has not been paid.
With all of this disruption, all of the emergencies that CDC has to respond to, and the turnover in key leadership positions, what is next for this critical agency?
Well, in addition to hiring rank and file employees, there's been a real push to fill some of the CDC's leadership ranks as well. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 80% of the center level leadership at CDC, those are acting officials. Slavinsky, who I mentioned earlier, coming into the CDC, he's worked in healthcare more broadly throughout his career, has a decades of experience in this field. He told employees he has never seen so many people in acting positions in any organization he's been at. Says that's something that's going to be a top priority to address.
That's Federal News Network's Jory Heckman. And Jory, let me just say, thanks. It's been a lot of fun to work with you. This will be your last time on the Federal Drive. We wish you all the best.
Thanks, Terry. It's been great.
You can find Jory's full story at federalnewsnetwork.com.